That monitor says he is fine, the old man said. He looked at Sergeant Ethan Cole's flushed face. And that monitor is answering the wrong question. Every person in Trauma Bay 2 turned toward the doorway. Ethan lay beneath a white sheet with his eyes open but unfocused. A pulse oximeter clipped to his finger glowed green. 100%. His cardiac rhythm remained orderly. His blood pressure was only slightly elevated. Nothing on the screens explained why a healthy 31-year-old soldier could no longer say his own name. Lieutenant Derek Walsh stood at the foot of the gurney with a tablet in one hand. Who let him cross the line? Thomas Callahan stood just beyond the red floor marking that read, "Authorized personnel only." Tom was 78. He wore faded khaki pants, a blue shirt, and a weathered brown jacket. An old leather medical bag hung from his left hand. He had been waiting for a routine appointment down the hall when the emergency team rushed Ethan past him. Now Tom was watching the patient's mouth. Ethan's lips moved. "Heater." Walsh leaned closer. "Sergeant, can you hear me?" "Heater," Ethan whispered again. "Turn it off." Tom stepped across the red line and reached toward the portable warming unit humming beside the gurney. Walsh caught his wrist. "You do not touch equipment in my bay." Tom looked at the younger man's hand, then toward Ethan. "Then turn it off yourself." His temperature was low when he arrived. His skin is warm now. He was transported in freezing weather. Tom looked at the pulse oximeter. 100%, Walsh said. His oxygenation is normal. Tom shifted his gaze to the soldier who had driven the transport vehicle. Private Mason Carter stood beside the supply cabinet with both hands pressed against his temples. Sweat shone along his forehead despite the cold room. A medic near Ethan rubbed the back of her neck and blinked too slowly. Tom looked back at Walsh. "Ask your driver whether his head hurts." Mason lowered one hand. "It is just a headache, sir." "How long were you in the vehicle?" Tom asked. Walsh released Tom's wrist. "You do not question my personnel." Tom ignored him. Mason answered anyway. "About 40 minutes. Was the heater running?" "Yes." Walsh stepped between them. "Sir, this is an active military treatment area. Return to the waiting room." Tom studied Ethan's breathing. Each breath was deep, deliberate, a body pulling harder at air that was not helping. The monitor continued its calm, regular beeping. Tom pointed toward the warming unit. "Turn it off. Move the driver into fresh air. Check everyone who rode in that vehicle." Walsh's expression sharpened. "You are making a diagnosis from a headache and one confused patient." "No," Tom looked around the room. "I am recognizing that 3 people from the same air are becoming sick at the same time." Specialist Emily Carter stood beside Ethan's head. She had been checking his pupils. Now she looked at Mason, then at the medic. The medic's cheeks were unusually red. Walsh saw Emily hesitate. "Specialist Carter, escort this gentleman back to the waiting area." Emily did not move immediately. Tom looked through the trauma bay windows. Outside, snowmelt ran down the glass. A gray military transport vehicle sat beneath the covered ambulance entrance with its engine still running. A pale stream drifted from its exhaust toward the side of the building. The wind pressed it beneath the canopy. Tom followed the direction of the plume. A dark ventilation louver sat less than 15 feet away. "Was that the transport?" he asked. Emily looked. "Yes." "Why is it still running?" "I do not know." Tom looked toward the ceiling vent. Warm air moved through it. The metal grill rattled softly. "Get everyone away from that air." Walsh gave a short breath of disbelief. "You are not part of this team. That does not change what is happening. It changes whether you have authority to disrupt an active trauma bay." Tom turned toward him. "You can explain authority after people are breathing clean air." Walsh looked at the monitors. 100%. Normal rhythm. Numbers he understood. Then he looked at Tom's plain clothing and dented leather bag. No badge. No uniform. No visible credential. What exactly are you supposed to be? Someone asking you to look at the room instead of the screen. Walsh's jaw tightened. "Do you hold an active medical license?" "No." "Hospital privileges?" "No." "Current military certification?" "No." Walsh nodded once. "Then whatever you remember belongs in history, not in my trauma bay." The room became quieter. Tom did not defend himself. He looked at Ethan. "He does not have time for your opinion of me." Mason swayed beside the cabinet. Emily crossed the room and caught his arm. "Mason, I am fine." He tried to straighten. His knees weakened. Emily guided him into a chair. The medic near Ethan gripped the bed rail. Walsh finally looked at all 3 of them together. Tom spoke carefully. "One patient can be anything. 3 people from one sealed vehicle are an exposure until you prove otherwise. Walsh turned toward Emily. Move the driver to the corridor. Put him on oxygen. Emily obeyed. Tom pointed toward the medic. Her too. Walsh did not argue this time. He looked at the portable warming unit. Switch it off. A nurse reached for the controls. The hum stopped. The sudden silence revealed the ventilation rattle overhead. Tom listened. The building was still pulling air. He looked through the window at the exhaust plume drifting toward the intake. Shut down recirculation in this section. Walsh looked at him. That would close the trauma wing. If the intake is pulling exhaust, the trauma wing is already closed. You just have not admitted it. Emily picked up her radio. Walsh raised one hand. Wait. Tom's expression remained steady. Walsh looked again at Ethan. The soldier's eyes were open but empty. Heater, Ethan whispered. The word was no longer a symptom. It was a witness. Walsh lowered his hand. Call facilities. Isolate this wing's intake. Move waiting patients to the east corridor. Emily transmitted the order. Tom released one quiet breath. Walsh looked at him. What do you think this is? Carbon monoxide until co-oximetry says otherwise. Walsh glanced at the pulse oximeter. It reads 100%. A standard pulse oximeter can mistake carboxyhemoglobin for oxygenated blood. Tom pointed to Ethan. The screen sees occupied hemoglobin. It does not know what is occupying it. Emily stared at the green number. It had not changed. The machine was not broken. It had never been designed to answer the question they were asking. Walsh ordered arterial blood sampling and co-oximetry. High-flow oxygen for Ethan, Mason, and the medic. Find the other passengers from the transport. The trauma bay moved with new purpose. No one was following Tom's orders now. They were following the pattern he had forced them to see. 2 security officers arrived at the doorway. Walsh had called them before the situation changed. The older officer looked from Tom to the oxygen masks. Lieutenant. Walsh hesitated. Tom lifted the leather bag. I will leave. Emily looked at him. You should stay. My part is finished. Tom turned toward the corridor. The younger security officer reached for the bag strap. The dented brass clasp opened. Several old objects slid onto the floor. A folded field dressing. A pair of bandage scissors. A blackened surgical clamp. A worn canvas patch. The clamp spun once beneath the fluorescent light and stopped near Tom's shoe. The patch landed face up. Lantern beneath it, in smaller lettering. 11 lived. One medic stared at the old instruments. Walsh looked at Tom. You carry these to a medical appointment? Tom bent down and picked up the clamp. The metal was burned along one side. His thumb moved across the blackened surface. For a moment, Trauma Bay 2 disappeared. Canvas walls moved in winter wind. A fuel heater shook beside a center pole. 12 men lay beneath blankets, complaining of headaches, nausea, and exhaustion. Tom was 22, a junior medic with no authority beyond the confidence others placed in his hands. The field physician believed the men had food poisoning. Their pulses were fast, but regular. Their breathing sounded clear. Their skin looked strangely healthy beneath the lanterns. One soldier laughed at a question he did not understand. Another kept asking someone to turn off a radio that was not playing. Tom looked at the heater. A field mouse lay motionless beside its exhaust pipe. He followed the pipe upward and found a split near the canvas wall. Everybody out. The physician refused. The rain outside had turned to sleet. Moving 6 soldiers into the cold seemed reckless. Tom did not argue twice. He used the blackened clamp to close the damaged fuel line. Then he tore open the tent flap. Cold air entered. Men complained as medics wrapped them in blankets and moved them outside. 11 came through the opening. Tom counted again. 11. Corpsman Matthew Reed had gone back for the medication case. Tom entered the tent after him. The heater had gone dark, but contaminated air remained beneath the low roof. He found Matthew near the rear table. Tom dragged him toward the opening. Another medic pulled from outside. Matthew reached the ring. His eyes never opened. Later, the surviving men made a patch. Lantern. 11 lived. Tom looked at the number and thought only of 12. The memory released him. He stood again in Fort Grayson Medical Center with the burned clamp in his hand. Emily picked up the patch. What does lantern mean? Tom closed his fingers around the metal. A light used to count people leaving a dark place. Walsh looked at the words. 11 lived. 12 were inside. Tom placed the clamp back into the bag. Before Walsh could ask more, Emily's radio sounded. The two other soldiers from Ethan's transport had been located. Both had headaches. One had become disoriented in the unit parking lot. Walsh's face changed completely. Move them into fresh air. Send emergency transport. Do not let either one drive. He turned toward facilities personnel entering the corridor. Shut down the western intake now. The facility's supervisor checked a tablet. The trauma wing carbon monoxide detector is showing maintenance bypass. For how long? The supervisor opened the log. Since 2:17 this morning. It was tested after a false alarm and never returned to active mode. Silence settled over the staff. Tom looked at the ceiling vent. The first machine was answering the wrong question. Then at the disabled detector. The second one was not listening. Walsh took the radio. Evacuate Trauma Bay 2 and the adjacent waiting area. Screen every patient and staff member who has been in this section during the last hour. He pointed toward the eastern entrance. Bring clean air in from that side. Keep ambulances away from the western canopy. The wing began to move. Waiting patients were guided into the east corridor. Blankets were distributed as cold air entered through open doors. The transport vehicle was shut down and moved away from the intake. Dr. Miriam Sloan arrived from the command office and assumed control of the exposure response. Walsh gave her the facts without protecting himself. Sergeant Cole arrived confused with a pulse oximeter reading of 100%. Two members of the transport team developed symptoms. Mr. Callahan identified the shared exposure and the vehicle exhaust near the intake. Sloan looked at Tom. How long have you been standing in this area? Tom considered the question. Since before Ethan arrived. Emily looked at him sharply. You were in the waiting area beside the intake. Yes. Do you have a headache? Tom did not answer. Emily stepped closer. Are you dizzy? The younger patients first. That is not an answer. Tom looked toward Ethan. It is the order that matters. Walsh stepped in front of him. No, the word surprised everyone. Walsh pointed toward an empty chair. You identified a shared exposure. That includes you. Tom studied him. Walsh's voice remained respectful. You do not get to teach us to count people and then remove yourself from the count. For the first time, something shifted in Tom's expression. Not pride. Recognition. He sat. Emily placed an oxygen mask over his face and drew blood for co-oximetry. The first laboratory results arrived minutes later. Ethan's carboxyhemoglobin level was 31%. Mason's was 24. The medic's was 17. Walsh closed his eyes for 1 second, then opened them. Transfer Ethan and Mason to a hyperbaric-capable facility. Continue high-flow oxygen for the medic and all symptomatic staff. Notify Regional Medical Command. Dr. Sloan nodded. Already in progress. Tom listened from the chair. The edges of the room had begun to soften. The clamp rested in his lap. Emily crouched beside him. What was Matthew Reed's job? Tom looked at the patch in her hand. Corpseman. He went back into the tent? For medicine. And you went after him? Tom did not answer. Emily understood. You counted 12. Every time. Tom's hand loosened around the clamp. It slipped from his fingers and struck the floor. Emily caught his shoulder as he leaned sideways. Mr. Callahan. Walsh moved immediately. Gurney. Now. They lifted Tom carefully and placed him on high-flow oxygen. His result returned. 19%. Dr. Sloan ordered his transfer. Tom raised one hand. Ethan. Stable for transport, Walsh said. The others. Located. Receiving oxygen. The waiting area. Cleared and screened. The intake. Isolated. Walsh leaned closer. Everyone is counted. Tom looked at him for several seconds, then lowered his hand. Emily picked up the burned clamp and placed it inside the leather bag. The patch remained in her hand. She photographed it and sent the image to Dr. Sloan's command office. Sloan looked at the screen. Her expression changed. Thomas Callahan? Emily nodded. Sloan stepped aside and made one call. At regional headquarters 3 blocks away, Brigadier General Robert Hale was reviewing a winter readiness briefing when an aide placed the photograph on his tablet. The faded word filled the screen. Lantern. 11 lived. Hale stopped breathing for half a second. Where is this? Fort Grayson Medical Center, sir. Group carbon monoxide exposure. An elderly veteran recognized it before the alarms. What name? Thomas Callahan. Hale pushed back from the table. The chair struck the wall. Is he conscious? Yes, sir. He was also exposed. Hale stood. Tell them not to delay treatment for me. I am coming to the medical center. 20 minutes later, Hale entered through the eastern doors. The crisis had become organized. Patients sat beneath blankets while staff documented exposure times. Ambulances loaded Ethan and Mason for transfer. Facilities teams inspected the intake and detector network. Dr. Sloan met Hale. Sergeant Cole is stable. The driver is stable. The 2 soldiers who returned to their unit have been found. No unaccounted patients remain. Callahan. Awaiting transfer. High-flow oxygen. Alert. Hale moved down the corridor. Tom lay on a gurney beneath a gray blanket. Emily stood beside him with the leather bag. Walsh remained at the foot of the bed, no longer looking toward the monitors unless the patient gave him a reason. Every uniformed person came to attention when Hale entered. Hale walked past them. He stopped beside Tom. The old veteran opened his eyes. Recognition came slowly. "Robert Hale," Tom said through the mask. Hale removed his cap. "You remember me. You were difficult to forget." A faint smile crossed Hale's face. "You said I answered questions too slowly." "You did. You told them I would be gone before their paperwork caught up." Tom's eyes softened. "Were you?" "Almost." Hale looked at the leather bag, then at the patch in Emily's hand. "How many were in the tent?" Tom's gaze moved to the faded words. 12. "The patch says 11. The patch was written by the men who came home. The corridor became silent. Hale understood the answer. "You counted Matthew Reed." "Every time." Hale brought his heels together. Tom saw the movement. "No ceremony." "There is no ceremony. No speech." "I did not bring one." Hale raised his right hand. "This is for all 12. Tom looked at the general. At Emily. At Walsh. At the staff still moving exposed patients through the corridor. Then Tom raised his hand. The salute was weak because of the oxygen mask and the exposure. It was still exact. Hale lowered his hand after Tom did. No one else saluted. The medical center did not become a stage. Work continued around them. Hale looked toward Walsh. "Lieutenant, who identified the exposure?" Walsh answered without hesitation. Mr. Callahan recognized the pattern. Specialist Carter connected the transport history. Facilities confirmed the disabled detector. Dr. Sloan organized the response. Tom looked at him. Walsh had learned the first lesson. Do not turn a rescue into one man's legend. Hale nodded. "And who was responsible for the delay?" Walsh held his posture. "I was." Tom shifted beneath the mask. Walsh continued. "I used the absence of current credentials as permission not to investigate his warning." Hale did not humiliate him. "What will you do with that?" Walsh looked toward the empty trauma bay. "I will teach the team what a pulse oximeter cannot tell us. I will require environmental exposure to be considered when multiple people from one location present with neurological symptoms. And I will listen before I decide a person has nothing useful to say." Tom watched him. "Better." Walsh looked at the old veteran. "I am sorry." Tom spoke through the mask. "Do not spend the lesson on me." He nodded toward Ethan's departing ambulance. "Spend it on the next patient." The transfer team prepared to move Tom. Emily placed the leather bag beside him. "You left this." Tom looked at the burned clamp inside, then at her. "Keep the clamp." Emily shook her head. "I cannot. You were the first person in the room to look at the people together." "I only hesitated." "You hesitated before obeying the wrong instruction." Tom closed her hand around the clamp. "That is where judgment begins." Emily looked at the scorched metal. "What should I do with it?" "Use it when you teach them to count." She glanced at the patch. 11. Tom looked at her. 12. Emily nodded. 12. The transfer team rolled Tom toward the eastern entrance. No one formed a line. No crowd applauded. Staff members simply opened the corridor and returned to the work in front of them. Hale walked beside the gurney until the ambulance doors. "Tom," the veteran looked over. "You saved me 40 years ago. I bought you time. I became a general. That was your mistake." Hale laughed quietly. Then his expression settled. "I have a wife. 2 sons. 5 grandchildren." Tom looked toward the snow beyond the doors. "That is what the time was for." Hale touched the edge of the gurney. "Come back when they release you. I have an appointment." "You missed it." "Then the hospital owes me another." The ambulance doors closed. The vehicle pulled away through the winter light. The following morning, Trauma Bay 2 remained closed for inspection. Walsh stood inside with 6 medics and 1 training mannequin. The pulse oximeter was attached to the mannequin's finger. Its screen glowed green. 100%. Walsh turned it off. Then he switched off the cardiac monitor. The sudden silence unsettled the room. Emily stood near the doorway holding the burned clamp. Walsh looked at the medics. Before a machine gives you a number, what do you have? No one answered. He pointed toward the mannequin. A patient. One medic stepped closer. Walsh continued. And before you diagnose one patient, what do you ask? Another medic looked around the room. Who else is sick? Walsh nodded. What environment did they share? The team began examining the scenario. They checked the simulated patient's skin, breathing, mental status, transport history, room ventilation. No one looked toward the blank monitor first. Emily placed the burned clamp inside a small clear case beside the trauma bay entrance. Beneath it, she added a plain card. First, count the people. In smaller letters, 12 were in the tent. Tom kept the lantern patch. The number still said 11. It always would. Machines measure what they were built to measure. They do not feel pride. They do not dismiss an old voice. They do not decide that a perfect number matters more than the person lying beneath it. Those mistakes belong to people. So does the responsibility to look again. And sometimes, when every screen says the patient is fine, the most important person in the room is the one who notices that everyone else is getting sick.